Hello everyone, it's been over a year since I made my first Tellarknight deck profile, so I thought I would revisit this deck. Before I begin, I would like to say that my next videos will be Budget Cyber Stalker, Heroic Challenger, and Salamandrate. Anyway, I have figured out that the basic elements of the Tellarknight deck are pretty much always going to be the same. The monster engine of my last version still holds up in my opinion, so all I did was add a few new spells and traps and mess with the extra deck a little bit. And by the way, because of our current global situation, cards have been coming in very slowly, so it's finally here. I can update this Tellarknight deck and do a few more videos after this as well, but here we go. So the monster lineup being the same, I'm still running 3 Altair, 3 Deneb, 3 Inuk High, 2 Vegas, and 1 Alsam. So I do play Desires, so 3 of each of the stronger ones is necessary, and I also play Ties of the Brethren now. So again, you need multiples if you want to be sure to have targets in your deck to special summon. As always, Deneb and Altair are the strongest two because those are the ones that will plus. If I didn't play Desires, I'm not sure I would run 3 Inuk High because later on in the game when your graveyard is already established, it's almost like a dead draw. Alsam is very similar in this way, like being dead. But the way I have the deck with Desires and Ties of the Brethren, I needed more monsters. So hand traps are 3 Ash Blossom and 1 Effect Veiler. I have been siding 2 more Effect Veilers, both against friends as well as online, because a couple of times did I run into a Tellarknight mirror match, and Effect Veiler really saves the day versus Trigger. So 3 Desires is necessary. Ties of the Brethren and Deneb are really your only way of picking up the deck and looking through it. So without those cards in your hand, you can easily lose the duel if you don't have more cards. This is in part a control deck, so it's good to see just enough monsters in your hand to make Trigger, and then the rest of your hand ideally would be traps, so you can, or hand traps, if you can have disruption on your opponent's turn. And then you would be setting those traps after you use Trigger, after you bounce the field. So more cards in your hand. 3 Tides of the Brethren. This is my new inclusion here, so it does have a pretty big life point cost, so I decided to take out all the Solemns besides Judgment. But this card is perfect in decks like Tellarknight because all of the monsters share type and attribute. It is a +1, and even if you can't conduct your battle phase the turn you use it, you can still make some impactful extra deck plays using the materials you've just brought onto the field. So 2 Twin Twisters, which is just a staple and deserves to be in the deck. This card can keep you in the duel depending on what deck you're playing against. 2 Skybridge. So think about bumping it to 3 actually because of the triple Desires. I took out Pot of Duality because special summoning happens with Vega, with Altair, and with Skybridge. So I found myself deliberately not choosing Skybridge from my 3 excavated cards when I used Duality. Because I couldn't special summon that turn, so I felt that conflict was big enough to take Duality out of the deck and keep Skybridge in the deck because it is such an essential card to bring up more Tellarknight monsters and get those summon effects. Rhoda and Monster Reborn, this is just staples, especially Monster Reborn and Rhoda. I mean, both of them in this kind of a deck, you want to be playing both. So traps, 3 Nova Alpha. This card and Judgment are how you are stopping your opponent from making important plays. A lot of times nowadays, even 2 or 3 negates isn't really enough to keep your opponent from having a successful turn. So it just goes to show that this deck has seen better days. But that said, not every deck from the old days or even from the new days has an Omni Negate counter trap like Nova Alpha. So that is one good point that Tellarknight still has. 3 Judgment. So like I said, I took out Strike and Warning because oftentimes I wouldn't have enough life points to pay, and Judgment's costs you can always pay. But one side note, this card cost about $1 when it was limited and then jumped to $10 when it was put at 3 on the ban list. So thankfully it has been reprinted now and is back at $1, but it's just like one of those necessary cards for this kind of a deck, control style decks. 3 Call of the Haunted. I've seen some Tellarknight decks that don't run this card, and I view that as an error in judgment, in my opinion, because if you can pull off a Trigger play while this card is face up, let's say you use this card to bring back a monster to go into Trigger, and you bounce this card back to your hand with Trigger, you can use it again later, which may lead to yet another Trigger summon. So this card is just, being continuous in this deck is a huge advantage. For some one-ups, we have a Crackdown. This is just a quick version of Mind Control, so it acts as an interruption on your opponent's turn, as well as serving you to put more Link monsters on the field. One Rivalry and one Goes a Match to finish off the main deck, because there is no variety of type or attribute at all to conflict in this deck. So for the extra deck, 3 Trigger. So this is the one card in the whole deck that makes this deck worth playing, really. If you look at the other Warrior rank 4 decks like Battling Boxer, Heroic Challenger, and even Noble Knight, none of them have, Noble Knight has some strong cards, but none of them have the powerhouse extra deck play that Trigger is. This card is non-targeting, non-destruction removal of the entire field. It's like an easier to summon Borlo Dragon. It's pretty much the only reason that anyone would still play this deck competitively in 2020. 2 Battlemaias. So this is to go into Trigger easier, which is another reason actually why Desires is great in this deck. So you have a card to discard for Battlemaias. 1 Deltaros, which is spot removal, just another classic and splashable rank 4 here. 1 Constellar Diamond. This is potentially the other reason to play this deck competitively. Many modern decks return from grave to hand, and they also send from deck to grave, so this card stops both of that. Other staples include Tornado Dragon and Abyss Dweller, so they pretty much see any, play in any rank 4 deck. Bujinte Tsukuyomi, which helps you turn your 1 card in hand into 2. And finally we have a Daigustal Emerald. So I've actually been wanting to update Tellarknight since this card came off the ban list. I was thinking about running Pot of Avarice for a little more draw power, but there aren't enough monsters in the deck for it to work all the time, so Pot of Avarice can be kind of dead in your hand sometimes. But you do have the option, because this is in the extra deck, it's an extra deck monster, you have the option to go into the Daigusto Emerald when you actually want to, and it only requires 3 monsters to be in the graveyard, so it works better than Pot of Avarice in my opinion, but they were removed from the ban list around the same time, so I was thinking about both. So for some links, got some staples, Nightmare Phoenix, Borlo Dragon, Saryuja Skuldred, but I am running a Gravity Controller as well, so this card was better in the Master Roll 4 days because your opponent would have to put XYZ, Synchros, and Fusions in the extra zone. But this card, it can still be good if you, let's say you put Trigger in the extra zone, and then somehow back on your opponent's turn, they put a strong extra deck monster in the extra zone, maybe probably a Link monster nowadays. You can spin both this card and your opponent's extra zone monster into the deck. So it is a Link 1. It's generally easy to bring out. I thought it would be worth to run Gravity Controller. And that's pretty much the Tellarknight deck profile for May 2020. Thank you for watching. Like I said, the next videos will be Budget Cyber Stalker, Heroic Challenger, and Salamangreat. So thanks. Bye-bye.